Your favorite crab meat pizza has arrived, Mom. Enjoy to your heart's content. As my daughter-in-law places the plate before me, her kindness seems out of character. I can't help but question this abrupt shift. It strikes me that my eldest child and his wife might be orchestrating some scheme, using food as their tool. Their history of hostility and past attempts to deceive me weigh heavily on my mind. The lavishness of this pizza only adds to my skepticism. Their sudden display of kindness feels more like a calculated move than genuine warmth. Trusting them blindly would be naive. It's clear they're plotting something. I refuse to be underestimated. I possess the capability to defend myself and reverse any situation if necessary. My name is Mary, a housewife in her 60s. Since my husband's passing years ago, I've lived alone. Initially, when my eldest child and their spouse proposed I move in with them, I declined. They were newlyweds, and I wanted them to relish that special phase. Nevertheless, they insisted on residing nearby out of concern for my well-being, a gesture for which I was genuinely appreciative. Their frequent visits, despite my reassurances that they needn't feel obligated, were a testament to their caring nature. My eldest child would often express worry, prompting me to relent and indulge their concern. Similarly, my daughter-in-law sought opportunities to foster a bond with me even when my eldest was occupied. I took pride in my child's choice of partner, believing her to be a person of integrity. However, I was oblivious to their ulterior motives at the time, a realization that now vexes me. Reflecting on those moments, I am irked by my own gullibility. Genuine kindness without hidden agendas is a rarity. I allowed myself to be swayed by their eloquent assurances, oblivious to the underlying truth. It wasn't until later that I uncovered their true intentions. One evening, they dropped by and ended up staying overnight, citing a lack of plans for the following day. Though I hesitated to encroach on their time as a couple, suggesting they return home since it was nearby, my daughter-in-law was insistent. "We're eager to strengthen our bond, so we'd like to stay," she asserted. Reluctantly, I acquiesced, offering them the guest room. This house, a creation of my late husband, holds many unused rooms since it's too large for just me. Despite its dustiness, my daughter-in-law graciously assisted in tidying up, showcasing her adeptness at housework and reinforcing my favorable opinion of her. In the quiet of night, I stirred, parched, and made my way to the kitchen. En route, I noticed the living room bathed in light. Intrigued, I peered in, finding them seated on the sofa engaged in conversation. Unable to resist the temptation, I surreptitiously listened in, inadvertently overhearing a dialogue between my eldest child and his wife. "I'm utterly drained," remarked the eldest child. "That old lady has us toiling like slaves, don't you agree?" "Just endure a little longer," the wife countered. "Once we secure Mom's inheritance, we're free. If her husband hadn't been a CEO, we wouldn't be in this predicament. It's astounding how easily she's deceived just because we're cordial to her. Mom's always been emotionally fragile. She'll likely bestow the inheritance upon us." I was dumbfounded by what I overheard. If their words held truth, then their kindness was merely a facade to lay claim to my late husband's estate. Had all their previous gestures been insincere? Every word they uttered to me were family bound to support each other, or so I thought. Why this fixation on the inheritance? I couldn't discern any financial troubles on his part, but perhaps he's entangled in dire straits unbeknownst to me. What drives them to such lengths for an inheritance? Is it solely for monetary gain? The behavior of the couple left me pondering, perplexed by their motives. I resolved to confront them about their recent conduct. Through inquiries within the neighborhood and among acquaintances, a startling revelation surfaced. Both of them were deeply entrenched in gambling, having accumulated an overwhelming debt far beyond their means to repay through conventional employment. It dawned on me why they were so desperate for the inheritance. My late husband had bequeathed a substantial portion to our eldest child, albeit less than what I received, yet still a sizable sum. They had recklessly squandered it, plunging into insurmountable debt. Their kindness, it seemed, was merely a guise to secure the inheritance from me. Following this discovery, I grew wary of their intentions. "Do you require any assistance, Mom? We're here to lend a hand," my daughter-in-law inquired, her words ringing hollow in light of the unsettling truth. "Your favorite crab meat pizza is here," my daughter-in-law announced cheerfully as she placed the plate before me. "Mom, eat as much as you want." Her sudden kindness struck me as odd. I couldn't help but question this abrupt change. Suspicions gnawed at me. It seemed my eldest child and his wife were orchestrating something, perhaps using food as a guise. They had a history of hostility and deceptive acts, so their newfound warmth raised red flags. It was clear to me that something wasn't right with this extravagant pizza. Their niceness felt contrived, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were up to something. I refused to be underestimated. Despite being a housewife in my 60s, living alone since my husband's passing, I was not without my own strength. When my husband died, my eldest child and their spouse had offered for me to move in with them. However, I declined, wanting them to cherish their newlywed bliss. Yet they insisted on living nearby out of concern for me, a gesture I initially appreciated. Their frequent visits, despite my reassurances that they made me feel obligated, only fueled my suspicions. But it wasn't until one fateful night that my doubts were confirmed. They stayed over, claiming they had no plans for the next day. I suggested they return home since it was close by, but my daughter-in-law insisted they stay to deepen our relationship. Reluctantly, I agreed, offering them the guest room. In the dead of night, I caught them conversing in the living room. What I overheard shattered any remaining trust I had in them. They spoke callously about me, about their plans to secure my late husband's inheritance. They had squandered their own fortune on gambling debts, leaving them desperate for money. Their kindness towards me was a ruse, a means to an end. From that moment on, I kept my guard up. When my daughter-in-law extended hollow offers of help, I politely declined, wary of their true intentions. Their subsequent attempt to confront me about a supposed new love interest only reinforced my skepticism. Their concern was a thinly veiled attempt to maintain control over my finances, and I refused to be manipulated any longer. I could see right through her facade. It was clear she was only concerned about protecting her inheritance. Yet my daughter-in-law continued to play the role of the caring daughter-in-law, never revealing her true intentions. That's acceptable for now, I thought. The true nature of my eldest child and their spouse will be revealed in due time. All witness their true selves when the moment is right. And that moment arrived sooner than anticipated. "Happy birthday, Mom," exclaimed my eldest child, presenting me with a bag from a fancy pizza establishment. Inside were an array of pizzas, including my beloved crab meat pizza. "Thank you, but let me handle these," I insisted, prepared to start plating them. "No, Mom, today is your day. Sit back and relax. I'll take care of it," declared my daughter-in-law. She whisked the bag away to the kitchen. My eldest child followed suit, offering assistance. Despite their seemingly genuine efforts to celebrate my birthday, I remained wary. Something was amiss. As I contemplated their motives, they returned with plates in hand. Before me sat a steaming slice of crab meat pizza. "Here's your favorite, Mom. Enjoy," my eldest child affirmed, echoing their spouse's sentiments. To an outsider, it might have seemed like a joyous birthday celebration, but I knew better. There had to be something sinister lurking on that plate. I refused to be fooled. Their excessive kindness raised suspicions that couldn't be ignored. With my husband no longer by my side, I understood the importance of protecting myself. I vowed never to place my trust in them again. They would soon rue the day they attempted to deceive me. "Well, it certainly appears appetizing, but my tastes have evolved recently. I find myself drawn to the foie gras on your plate," I remarked, reaching for my eldest child's dish. They tried to intervene, but I feigned ignorance, questioning, "Is there a problem? You know, I've developed a newfound appreciation for foie gras. And if memory serves, you used to enjoy crab meat too, didn't you?" I suggested we share both dishes, observing the sudden pallor that washed over my eldest child's face. It was evident that they had schemed to manipulate me by tampering with my favorite pizza. Their reluctance to indulge confirmed my suspicions. "But it looks so tantalizing. Won't you have a taste?" I prodded, watching as their facade crumbled under the weight of their deceit. With resolve, I reached for a slice of the crab meat pizza and offered it to my eldest child. Reluctantly, they took a bite, their expression tense as if anticipating the aftermath. Daughter-in-law glanced at them, her concern evident in the pallor of their face. "You seem a bit off color. Perhaps the pizza didn't agree with you, Mom," she suggested, her voice tinged with apprehension. "Considering how your husband is feeling, maybe it's best to call it a night and prepare something different," she added, her panic palpable. Sensing daughter-in-law's desperation to end the meal, I countered, "But your son doesn't appear well either. It's safer for you to stay the night." Despite her attempts to deflect, insisting they leave, her words faltered, betraying her desire to depart. It was clear she was eager to make a swift exit. I always thought that for a couple attempting to deceive others, they're remarkably inept liars. They unravel at the slightest hint of unpredictability. I mused to myself as I observed my eldest child. Suddenly, something peculiar occurred. After a few moments, with a resounding thud, they collapsed to the ground. As I approached, I realized they were deeply asleep, likely drugged with a sleeping pill. Oh, couldn't keep your eyes open, could you? Must have been exhausted, I remarked, tilting my head in feigned innocence. Daughter-in-law's frustration boiled over. Enough. Why won't things go according to plan? Today was supposed to be crucial, she exclaimed, slapping my eldest child's cheek in a futile attempt to rouse them. But they remained unconscious, oblivious to her distress. I stood in stunned silence as daughter-in-law's facade crumbled before my eyes. Disregarding my presence, she began to confess. I had been pretending to be the dutiful daughter-in-law, all in hopes of securing the inheritance to clear our debts. Today was meant to be the final step. We planned to incapacitate you and steal your banking card. But nothing went as planned. It's your fault, she accused, her glare piercing. Their scheme to drug me and steal my banking card under the guise of a birthday celebration was truly deplorable. I couldn't stoop to their level, so I decided to confront them head-on. I've known all along that your kindness was just a front to get to my money. That's why I kept my distance and declined your offer of pizza, I revealed, watching as daughter-in-law's expression shifted from shock to disbelief. It was clear she had underestimated my awareness of their deceit. How foolish they must feel for thinking they could deceive me so easily. Sorry to burst your bubble, but I'm not as naive as you both seem to think, I continued, a hint of scorn in my voice. Your sudden displays of kindness always struck me as suspicious, and I even overheard your conversation about the inheritance when I stayed over, discussing your plans in the target's own home. That's just plain foolish. Don't label us as fools. We've been doing our best, daughter-in-law retorted defensively. If this is your best effort, then it's no wonder you're drowning in debt, I countered sharply, watching as daughter-in-law's expression shifted with discomfort at the mention of the word debt. And you know about the debt too. How much do you know? It was evident that daughter-in-law hadn't anticipated my knowledge of their financial woes. Her anxiety was palpable at the mention of their debt. I did some digging and discovered the extent of your gambling debts. It was quite a shock to find out. You've managed to accumulate quite a substantial debt, I stated matter-of-factly, noting the growing pallor of daughter-in-law's face. She must have realized there was no escaping the truth. Mom, I'm truly sorry. Please forgive us. We're struggling to make ends meet. Can you lend us some money? We'll repay you, daughter-in-law pleaded earnestly, her once confident demeanor now replaced with desperation. Even in her distress, she continued to seek financial assistance. It was disheartening to realize that, to her, I was merely seen as a convenient source of support. I'm sorry, but I won't be giving you a single cent. I can't trust individuals like you to fulfill your promises, I responded firmly, refusing to yield to her pleas. You need to take responsibility for your actions. Daughter-in-law's demeanor shifted to one of resignation at my words. Though visibly disheartened, she seemed to comprehend my unwavering stance and refrained from asking for money again. Following that confrontation, my interactions with my eldest son and daughter-in-law gradually waned. They ceased visiting, barely maintaining any communication. Surprisingly, when those days arrived, I didn't experience loneliness as I had expected. Instead, I felt a sense of liberation, free from the shackles of deceit. Eventually, my eldest child and daughter-in-law relocated. According to neighbors, they were escorted away by dubious individuals, likely unable to settle their debts and forced to flee to a distant state. Perhaps they now endure harrowing circumstances, plagued by the consequences of their actions. Yet such matters are no longer my concern. We are estranged, our ties severed. I bid farewell to this tumultuous chapter, confiding in my late husband's photograph. His expression seemed to exude a sense of relief, as if acknowledging the closure of a fraught period. My sole family now resides in the memory of my late husband, the one who steadfastly stood by me. Though life is fleeting, I am determined to embrace it with strength, cherishing the cherished moments shared with my husband. My name is Mary, a 35-year-old employee. I was born with a weak constitution, often catching colds and missing school. Perhaps due to this, I didn't have many close friends. Even in middle school, my frailty didn't change. Classmates who didn't like this often approached me, saying, "Hey, you're supposedly sick and missing school, but in reality, you just want to play hooky, right? It must be nice having it so easy." We can't take off because our parents are strict. Honestly, I was envious. Being spoken ill of like that was a usual occurrence. I often came back home feeling hurt and wounded by the heartless words of my classmates. I felt as if there was an invisible wall between me and my classmates, making my middle school days particularly difficult. As an adult, I couldn't easily miss work for a minor fever, so I always put work first, even if it meant pushing myself. Especially as a new employee, my training supervisor was extremely stern. He constantly said things like, "Illness comes from the mind, show some spirit." So keeping up with it was quite a struggle. As my days were consumed by work, I noticed my peers getting married and becoming happy. It made me realize that I was reaching that age too. However, I never felt a rush to get married. I believed I would never find a kind person who would want to marry someone with my health issues. But life is unpredictable, and unexpectedly, a man who invited me out for a meal appeared out of the blue. This person is my husband, Thomas. "Hey, looks like you're finishing up for the day, right? If it's all right with you, would you like to grab dinner together?" Thomas was an elite, a graduate of a prestigious university, and was considered a future head of the department. He was not only competent at work but also cooperative and trusted by everyone around him. He had a personality completely opposite to my introverted one. I was surprised when he suddenly invited me to dinner. At first, I didn't even realize he was talking to me and thought he must have mistaken me for someone else. However, it seemed he was indeed inviting me, which even left me blurting out, "Ha!" Thomas was quite popular with the female employees because of his personality and good looks. It was a mystery to me why he was still single. Yes, I'm almost done with my work, so that would be fine. In the end, I couldn't refuse his invitation, so I went along for dinner. But this meal became the catalyst for the two of us to grow close quickly. He was very friendly, and the conversation flowed naturally. It was the first time in a long time I had been able to laugh and talk with someone other than family. Although I had to head home because of work the next day, I found myself wishing I could spend more time with him. We started spending more time together after that meal, and 3 months later, we began dating. Considering our ages, we decided to marry. A year after we started dating, we found a small apartment near the train station and moved in together. I never imagined I'd get married and truly believed I was about to start a happy life. I never expected this marriage to be the beginning of a nightmare. Shortly after getting married, he gradually began to reveal his true nature. After our marriage, I switched jobs and started working at a different company. It was a company with many female employees. During the interview, when I mentioned my health issues, they reassured me that with so many women working there, I shouldn't worry. Today, I was able to take a day off due to their understanding. "Hey, why are you sleeping? The head of the household is back. Shouldn't you welcome me home? You're so dumb." As soon as I got home, he came into the room with a sulky face, seemingly displeased that I hadn't greeted him. "I'm sorry. I was feeling unwell today and took the day off from work. I'm about to make dinner. Why don't you go take a bath first?" Upon hearing these words, Thomas, who was already in a bad mood, said, "Ha! You're just starting to make dinner now? When a husband comes home, it's obvious that dinner should be ready. Are you lying about being sick just because you want to skip household chores? You're such an incorrigible woman." His words reminded me of what my classmates used to say to me back in my school days. They would often say I was skipping class under the guise of being sick. Their words would always hurt my heart, but even when I was feeling sick, Thomas never helped with the chores. Instead, he treated me like a housemaid. Then one day, a certain incident happened. I felt particularly bad that day, with a fever exceeding 104 degrees and dizzy to the point where I couldn't even stand up. Ideally, Thomas should have taken me to the hospital, but instead, he grabbed his carry-on bag and walked straight out the front door without a glance at me. "Wait a minute, you're leaving me in this condition?" Shocked by his indifference, I couldn't help but shout, "It can't be helped. It was planned from before. Take care of the rest." With that, he really left the house. About 30 minutes after he left, my condition worsened. I called an ambulance myself and was taken to the hospital. My parents and my brother came rushing to the hospital as soon as they heard the news. While receiving an IV, I explained everything that had happened so far. As I spoke, both my parents' and brother's faces turned red. Leaving his sick wife behind to go on a trip, this behavior was unacceptable not only to my parents but also to me. That's why I decided to carry out a certain plan with my parents and brother. I did text him that I was hospitalized, and soon after, I got a message from Thomas. I'm about to head home, so I called the house, but no answer. Are you still in the hospital? Come home and cook my dinner. Seeing this message, my brother decided to call Thomas. Surprised by the sudden call from my brother from my phone, Thomas assumed it was me and started talking arrogantly. However, when he realized it was my brother, he immediately changed his tone and started apologizing. But it was too late. With a low, angry voice, my brother said to him, "Sorry to inform you, but Mary won't be coming back to that house. She passed away." What? Even Thomas couldn't hide his surprise at the shocking words that suddenly came out of my brother's mouth. However, he soon regained his composure and said with a nonchalant tone, "I see. Understood. Once things settle down, I'll take care of the necessary procedures. Thank you for everything till now," and with that, he hung up the phone. Wouldn't most people, upon hearing their wife had passed away while traveling, rush home in a panic? Yet he, far from showing concern, hasn't even asked about the funeral schedule. In other words, he couldn't care less about me. After that, I felt something snap within me. From then on, I decided to carry out a plan that my brother had devised while he was at work. I returned home. I deliberately cleaned up the messy room until it sparkled, folded the laundry that had been hung up, and put away the dishes, taking great care not to drop a single speck of dust. During that time, I checked things like the drains and toothbrushes. After doing this a few times, my brother received a call from him. "Hey, it's rare for you to call. What's up?" Although he spoke calmly, my brother's eyes were smiling. He probably knew he would get a call. Unaware of this, he said over the phone, Can I ask you something? Did you go into my room while I was out?" "Into your room? No, I didn't go in. Why would you ask that?" Perhaps even he, as insensitive as he is, found it eerie that the room was constantly sparkling clean, so he thought my brother was entering the room and called to confirm. The thing is, the room that was messy until this morning is incredibly clean. When I returned home, the trash on the floor was thrown away, the laundry is folded. Something is weird. "Did you come to pick up Mary's stuff?" Speaking with a tremor in his voice, my brother replied, "Oh, come on, there's no way I'd do that. I never got a spare key to your room for my sister when she was alive, and our mom has been too busy with work lately to visit you there, Thomas. You must be tired to think this way." Although it was my brother who planned it, I was the one carrying it out. Even for my brother, it was impossible to enter the room without permission. Therefore, in legal terms, it's still me, his wife, who was doing this. I, who was listening to the conversation next door, had a hard time not bursting out laughing. "If your room was ransacked, I could understand. But it's clean. Is there a problem with that?" No, that's not it." It seemed he had something he didn't want to say. My husband fell silent. A few days later, there was another call from him to my brother's cell phone. Apparently, strange things continued to happen after that, so he consulted with the police. However, the police officer did not take his story seriously. Because if things were missing, they could understand. But when he explained that the rooms were sparkling clean, the laundry was folded, they laughed and said, "Are you living alone? Maybe your mom came from your family home and cleaned up your room? Or did you forget that you cleaned up while you were drunk? Anyway, since nothing is missing, you should be grateful." That's unfortunate, but as the police officer said, nothing is missing. That's a good thing, right? Maybe Mary's spirit is lingering in your room, cleaning it up while you're away. Upon saying this, he seemed to take it seriously and hung up with a trembling voice. Eventually, considering the potential nuisance to others, I decided to reveal myself to my husband. One day, timing it perfectly with my husband Thomas's return, I entered the room to find him asleep on the sofa, his face flushed red. He might have come back from a drinking party, or maybe the alcohol helped him sleep better. The table and floor were strewn with cans of beer. It seemed like he had fallen asleep in his drunken stupor. Seeing him fast asleep and snoring, I decided to carry out a special surprise. I had in mind, what's going on? Thomas suddenly jumped as the light, which he thought had been turned off, suddenly switched on. Seeing me, whom he believed had passed away based on the information from my brother, he let out a gasp. Ariel, a ghost, an adult man, saw me and immediately yelled that I was a ghost, tears welling up in his eyes as he stared at me. I'm sorry. I didn't attend the funeral. I promised to pray for you, so please rest in peace." He mumbled these words while putting his hands together, trembling. "Look carefully. I've got legs, right? I'm not a ghost. I'm very much alive." Confirming the existence of my legs, he turned red with anger, this time glaring at me with a terrifying expression. What the hell do you think you're doing? Do you think this is acceptable? Plus, you've even involved my parents. Unforgivable. I'll take legal action against you for this. Yes, against the outburst. I was about to execute the real surprise. Suddenly, my mother, who had been waiting outside the entrance, went to call someone. The moment he saw the person, Thomas, who had been red with anger just a moment ago, turned pale and began to sweat profusely. What's wrong? You're pale and sweating. Are you feeling unwell? Maybe you should go to the hospital. It was understandable why his complexion was poor, because the person standing in front of him was someone he had recently traveled with. It was the woman with whom he had had an affair. In reality, my brother, suspecting Thomas's infidelity, had been talking to a friend who worked in the same company since I left the job. Thomas had been getting along well with a woman named Natalie who worked at the reception of the same company. It seemed as if they were just friendly colleagues, but multiple employees had witnessed the two of them getting cozy in the break room, and rumors circulated in the company that the two might be dating. Many employees knew that he was married to me, so they immediately realized that their relationship was something more than just friendship. His good friends were torn between reporting this to me and the boss. They were hesitant because they were worried about me, who had always been weak, and how I might fall sick from the shock. Hearing this, the woman bowed her head and bit her lip, unbearably embarrassed. Thomas, feeling embarrassed, called his mother to explain the situation. In response, his furious mother shouted at us with a ferocious tone. What is this? Being my son like this, I've always disliked you. Despite not graduating from a prestigious university, you are so arrogant. On top of that, you all tricked my son and hurt him, which is unforgivable. I'll make sure you divorce. There will be no alimony. Whether it was because she had been shouting or not, she was taking heavy breaths, her shoulders heaving up and down. Of course, if she didn't know the situation, it was only natural for her to be upset, thinking we were bullying Thomas one-sidedly. However, my father spoke calmly, explaining the whole situation to my fuming stepmother. The first time she heard this, she had a look on her face that said she could hardly believe it. When he explained that her son had abandoned his wife, who was suffering from poor health, to go out with his mistress who was in the room, it seemed she finally noticed the presence of this mistress. Her previous bluster was gone, and she was simply shaken. The woman, feeling completely uncomfortable, bowed her head in apology to us. I am so sorry. I will fully pay you damages. Please forgive me. Unlike her flustered boyfriend and dazed mother-in-law, the woman bowed deeply and apologized. I had her write a promissory note on the spot. When I told her I would consult a lawyer at a later date, she responded in a frail voice, "Understood." I couldn't possibly forgive someone who had done this to me. I showed him the filled-out divorce papers and said, "I can't possibly forgive you for this. I'm going to consult a lawyer about everything that's happened." After that, I divorced him. Because he didn't come to my aid when I was ill, I ended up receiving a significant amount of money. With that money, I rented a small apartment and have been commuting to work from there. The office is still full of talks about the two of them, but I don't know if it's because he's thick-skinned or what, but he continues to work as if nothing has happened. Hearing about that doesn't make me feel anything. If anything, I think, so that's what kind of man he was. I decided to try and forget about this as soon as possible and threw myself into my work even more than before. Even with difficult tasks, I worked hard to understand them while asking my boss, and it seems that my efforts were recognized as I was chosen for a 1-year overseas assignment. I am already fluent in English, so I won't have any trouble living abroad. Just as I was getting excited about my overseas assignment, I suddenly started getting repeated calls from an unknown number. Since it was an unknown number, I initially thought it was a wrong number, but since it kept calling over and over again, I thought it might be someone I know, and I answered the call. "Huh? Who is this?" When I cautiously asked, it turned out to be Thomas. "It's been a while, Mary. Have you been well? I just wanted to hear your voice and ended up calling." Unbelievable. He called me casually after what happened. I wonder what he could think of me. The more I heard his voice, the angrier I became. "What do you want now? I have nothing to discuss with you. After this call, never contact me again." Then he started talking with a desperate voice. "Wait, just listen to me for a second. Actually, I married Natalie, but she doesn't do any housework at all. Since we got married, she doesn't clean at all, and all we eat are pre-made meals. On top of that, I've started to have to take care of my mother. Honestly, I'm in trouble. Although she looked beautiful and neat, in reality, she didn't do any housework. All the meals were grab-and-go food or ready-made meals, and she didn't clean, so the floor was covered in dust. On top of everything, he had to begin to take care of his mother, and in desperation, he turned to me for help. I couldn't help but let out a heavy sigh over the phone, and I felt more certain than ever that breaking up had been the right choice. I'm sorry, but I'm scheduled for an overseas assignment, and there's nothing I can do. Besides, she's the woman you chose. You can't blame anyone else. Take care of your own wife. Upon learning I couldn't assist due to my overseas posting, he pleaded, "Help me. Take me with you to your new overseas position. I can't stand this filthy woman anymore. Life was better with you. Give me another chance." But even if he asks for another chance, he wanted this outcome. No matter how much he struggles, he can't return to the previous state. He was still talking over the phone, but I left him hanging, said I had work, and ended the call. Then I blocked his number. He didn't like that. It seems that very day he showed up at my parents' house, demanding a remarriage and help, spouting nonsense. My father called the police, and he was taken to the station. The company found out about this, and he got fired. He also got divorced, and to pay alimony, he is helping out with the family business while taking care of his mother. Apparently, the family business is physically demanding and quite harsh, and he tries to run away from home many times. But each time he is brought back by relatives, and he seems to be having a hard time every day. As Mary, nearing her late 50s, reflects on her life, she finds herself at a turning point. With her 2 children, one on the brink of marriage and the other thriving in college, she senses her motherly duties waning. As a former nurse, she contemplates a return to caregiving, feeling the pull of her profession once more. However, life throws her a curveball when she receives distressing news. Her father-in-law, Bob, has suffered a stroke. Rushing to the hospital at her husband John's urgent call, Mary's thoughts swirl with concern. Bob, always a pillar of kindness and warmth, has been grappling with the loss of his wife, Alice, for the past 3 years. Despite Mary's efforts to uplift his spirits through family gatherings and outings, she's noticed a gradual decline in Bob's energy. Just as she begins to see glimmers of his old vitality returning, the news of his stroke hits her like a thunderbolt. Arriving at the hospital, she finds Bob's daughter and son-in-law engaged in conversation, a mix of emotions swirling within her. "Apologies for my tardiness. How's Bob holding up?" I gasped out, hurting to catch up with John's sister, Isabella. Her response was a sigh of irritation as she glanced my way. Clearly annoyed. "You're late. We're in a hurry. Can you handle this?" With that brisk dismissal, she hurried off, leaving me behind. Isabella's indifference towards Bob was palpable, a demeanor she carried even when Alice, Bob's late wife, was alive. Despite Bob and Alice's unwavering kindness, Isabella remained aloof, untouched by their warmth. Left alone in the waiting area, I paced nervously, my thoughts consumed by Bob's condition. Meanwhile, John rushed in, his concern evident in the beads of sweat on his forehead and his soaked dress shirt. "Mary, how's Dad?" he asked anxiously. I shook my head, indicating I had no updates yet. John's reaction was visceral. He dropped the bags he was carrying, his complexion draining of color. "No, that's not what I meant," I reassured him quickly. "He's still in surgery. We're waiting for news." Relief washed over John, evident in the way he retrieved his fallen bags and slumped into a nearby chair. "Should we brace ourselves?" I hurried over to John, who teetered on the edge of tears, and placed a comforting hand on his back. "It'll be all right," I murmured, feeling utterly helpless with no words substantial enough to offer solace. Hours ticked by before the surgery's conclusion, and we were ushered into a small room by the doctor for an update. "The surgery went well, but there may be lasting effects," the doctor explained gently, indicating that Bob would require ongoing care. While our hearts hoped for Bob's swift recovery, the reality of caregiving loomed, a responsibility that would involve Isabella and her husband. John and I decided to reach out to Isabella to discuss the next steps. After a conversation, we agreed to convene at Bob's home, a gathering necessitated by the circumstances while Bob remained hospitalized. "I won't be his caregiver," Isabella declared bluntly, sending shockwaves through John and me. "But what are we supposed to do then?" I countered, baffled by her indifference. Isabella, nonchalant, continued toying with her meticulously manicured nails, a stark contrast to the gravity of the conversation. Her husband, Tom, simply nodded along. "What about a nursing home?" I suggested, met with Isabella's vehement refusal. "I'm not wasting money on that. This is what happens whenever I get involved," she snapped, shooting me a venomous glare. "It's like my opinion doesn't matter, so I keep quiet. If he can't go to a facility and neither of you will care for him, what's the plan?" John pressed, frustration seeping into his voice. "That's why you should handle it. I don't want some burden in my home," Isabella chuckled callously, pushing me to my breaking point. "Enough. He's your father, for heaven's sake," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. "I don't care. Why am I expected to bear the responsibility just because he's my father? He's John's father too. I've been saying you two should handle it." "I don't have a response to that. We'd love to care for him at home, but our house isn't equipped for it," I explained, feeling the weight of reality pressing down. "There are too many obstacles, stairs, uneven floors. To bring my father-in-law here, we need significant renovations and we simply can't afford it." "Mary, you're trained in caregiving, aren't you? It shouldn't be a big deal," Isabella remarked smugly, her tone grating on my nerves. John shared my frustration, and we silently agreed to table the discussion for now, retreating from his parents' home. "What's our next move, Mary? You mentioned considering a return to caregiving," John inquired, his concern evident. "It's not just about the job. We have to make this place safe for Dad, and that's a financial challenge," I replied, trying to reassure him. "You're right," John conceded, acknowledging the daunting road ahead. "I estimate it could cost around $100,000. That's just a ballpark figure, but considering the modifications needed for the entire first floor to accommodate him, that's roughly what we're looking at," I mused aloud, grappling with the daunting financial reality. With our eldest still in college, we simply don't have that kind of money. We're still paying off the mortgage, and the thought of taking on another loan for renovations is overwhelming. It's a difficult decision, but should we consider a facility for him? The question is, would he even be able to get in? The waitlists are long, and the expenses significant, and I doubt Isabella and her family would offer any assistance. It feels like we're stuck with no viable solution. Deciding to at least listen to my father-in-law's perspective, I made my way alone to the hospital where he was admitted. Stepping into his room, I was greeted by a sight that lifted my spirits. My father-in-law, visibly improved, greeted me with a warm smile. "Please don't apologize," my father-in-law would often murmur upon my visits. "There's no trouble at all. And look, I've brought you one of your favorite books today." "Why apologize? You're bringing me joy," I'd respond, trying to uplift his spirits. The doctor had informed us of his stroke, leaving him unable to move the right half of his body independently. To read, he'd prop the book on the table, using a weight to keep the pages steady. "Ah, thank you," my father-in-law replied gratefully, accepting the book I'd brought. I gently placed the book by his pillow. "Dad, I came today because I wanted to talk about what lies ahead," I began, meeting his warm smile with a heavy heart. "Oh, I understand. I'll be fine, even in a nursing home. I've prepared for it, so please don't worry," he reassured me, though I sensed a flicker of loneliness in his eyes. "Well, Dad, if you're open to it, why not come stay with us? I have experience in elderly care, and as a stay-at-home mom, I have the time. John will be there too. Let's live together," I blurted out, sensing his solitude. His surprise was evident, perhaps realizing deep down that returning to his own home, where Isabella and her husband resided, might not be feasible. I couldn't shake the feeling that they'd view him as a burden, ultimately leading to a nursing home. The thought weighed heavily on me, overshadowing my initial intention to listen to my father-in-law's wishes. There was a twinge of guilt toward my husband John, but I knew he'd understand. Now, we needed to arrange for his care upon discharge. Money was a concern, so I decided to seek Isabella's input. With these thoughts swirling in my mind, I made my way home. When John returned from work, I recounted the events at the hospital. He appeared troubled but nodded, almost as if he had anticipated this turn of events. Without delay, John dialed Isabella's number. "We're reaching out for assistance because we'll be the ones caring for Dad," John explained, his voice tinged with frustration as their conversation escalated. With a resigned sigh, he ended the call and briefed me on their exchange. "Isabella refused to contribute any funds. It seems there's little we can do about it," he disclosed, his concern evident as he contemplated the financial implications for his father-in-law. From then on, our home buzzed with activity. We deliberated over renovations, essential care supplies, and received guidance on home care options. When I informed my father-in-law that he'd be moving in with us upon discharge, his expression was a mix of gratitude and regret. "Mary, could you fetch the checkbook from over there?" he requested, gesturing toward a cloth bag on the shelf. Curious as to why he'd need it, I obliged, retrieving the checkbook during one of our visits. Observing my father-in-law, I watched as he opened the bank book and presented it to me. "I have some savings here. Could you and John make use of it?" The figure written in the checkbook was staggering, surpassing any amount I'd ever seen. Stunned, I must have appeared frozen, prompting my father-in-law to chuckle. "You and John will be looking after me now, won't you? I heard about the new car and the renovations to make the house accessible. Would $10 million cover it? $10 million. The zeros overwhelmed me, leaving me speechless. I couldn't fathom why my father-in-law had amassed such a fortune, but it seemed that after my mother-in-law's passing, he had turned to investments he had been studying, and they had proven lucrative. His savings had grown exponentially, fueled by his restrained spending habits. Yet even if he intended to renovate the house or purchase a car, the sum seemed excessive. Reluctantly, I returned the bank book, shaking my head. "I can accept this much. Please keep it for yourself." He pushed the book back toward me, insisting, "I can't possibly use all of this. I'd rather return it to you and your family, who are willing to care for me." Once again faced with the returned bank book, I stood my ground. "I really can't accept such a large sum," I insisted firmly. After a brief pause, my father-in-law proposed, "How about $1 million?" Realizing the impasse, I managed to negotiate a compromise, settling on a reduced amount of $100,000. Though he seemed reluctant, he agreed, and for the time being, that seemed satisfactory. As we were in the midst of this exchange, Isabella suddenly appeared, catching us off guard. Quickly, I stashed the bank book back in its place. Seeing my hurried actions, Isabella's brow furrowed in concern. "What's going on?" she inquired, her voice tinged with worry. I breathed a sigh of relief, grateful she hadn't overheard our previous conversation. Isabella had come to deliver some clothes for our father. After a brief exchange, we left the hospital room together. However, on our way home, Isabella suggested stopping by a coffee shop for a discussion. Given her history of bringing up unpleasant topics, I braced myself for what was to come. Reluctantly, I acquiesced, unaware of the twist awaiting us. "I'll take care of Dad," Isabella declared out of the blue, stunning me. Her sudden proposition caught me off guard, especially since we were already knee-deep in preparations to accommodate my father-in-law, including ongoing renovations to our home. I couldn't fathom why she would make such a proposal at this stage. "So you won't need to visit the hospital anymore," she added. "Visiting isn't solely the responsibility of the caregiver. There's no rule dictating that only the caretaker should visit." Why would she say that? I pondered, feeling perplexed by Isabella's unexpected offer. Despite my reservations, I suggested we postpone discussing it further and made my exit from the cafe. Back at home, I shared the encounter with John, who mulled over it before a realization dawned on him. "She must have caught wind of the savings," he concluded. "It seems that's the case," he added. "Otherwise, she wouldn't have volunteered for the caretaking role, especially given her previous reluctance." I harbored a vague suspicion that Isabella had somehow discovered the extent of my father-in-law's savings and was angling to secure a share of it for herself. Perhaps she would concoct a reason to start dipping into the funds. "But what do we do about it?" I queried, feeling a sense of unease. "I've got an idea. Let's give her a chance," John suggested with a mischievous grin, hinting at a plan brewing in his mind. Uneasy about his scheme, I opted to stay silent and play along with Isabella's request for the time being. I assured my father-in-law that financial concerns were no longer an issue and that Isabella would be providing care. His response was vague, his expression neither confirming nor denying his comprehension. With that, the conversation concluded. Following his discharge from the hospital, my father-in-law returned to the family home in Nebraska, where Isabella resided. During a visit to the house, I couldn't discern any signs of renovation or adequate caregiving supplies. I questioned whether genuine caregiving could take place under such circumstances. However, it was Isabella's decision, and I felt it wasn't my place to intervene, so I remained silent. 2 months later, I received a frantic call from Isabella. "Mary, I can't do this anymore. Please come over right now," she pleaded urgently. Concerned, I wasted no time and rushed to the house in Nebraska. Upon my arrival, I was greeted by a disarrayed house and a foul odor lingering in the air. Puzzled by the scene before me, Isabella emerged, looking more worn out than ever. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her movements were unsteady. "Are you all right?" I asked, rushing to her side, alarmed by her condition. Isabella grasped my hand tightly and muttered, "Get rid of that." Confused at first, I managed to calm her down and coax an explanation out of her. It appeared that she had underestimated the demands of caregiving. From assisting with mobility and meals to managing incontinence, including dealing with diapers, the responsibilities had overwhelmed her. She felt incapable of managing anything, not even attending to her own needs. I reassured her that I couldn't make any immediate decisions but promised to reach out as soon as possible. With a heavy heart, I carried this burden home with me. "It's been 2 months already." "Impressive," John remarked, glancing at the calendar. It seemed he had anticipated this turn of events. He suggested we pick up my father-in-law on his next day off, and I readily agreed. A few days later, as we arrived at the family home in Nebraska, my father-in-law was already packed and prepared to depart. Relief washed over me knowing we could finally bring him home. Just because I endured for 2 months and used to live here doesn't mean I don't deserve compensation. "I think $5 million sounds fair," Isabella declared suddenly as we were assisting my father-in-law into the car. I froze in disbelief. John, too, was taken aback, turning to face Isabella with a mixture of surprise and dismay. But she remained unfazed, sporting a smug expression. "Isabella, what on earth are you talking about? This isn't the time or place to discuss money, especially not in front of Dad. Remember, he raised us," John reasoned, attempting to appeal to her sense of decency, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. "I'm his daughter. It's only fair that I get compensated," Isabella retorted defiantly, her audacity catching me off guard. How could she be so brazen? Appalled by Isabella's attitude, I couldn't hold back. "Isabella, discussing money in this manner is completely inappropriate. Besides, you've already received funds," I interjected, my father-in-law echoing my sentiment with a disbelieving expression. "That's all gone now. Just $5 million. What's the harm in that? If you're just going to squander it away, you might as well put it to good use, sis." Isabella's callous words towards her own father left me speechless. Even my typically composed husband John was visibly enraged, his face flushing red with anger as he glared at his sister. "John, it's all right. She's stating the truth." Bob, my father-in-law, attempted to calm his incensed son. Then, turning to Isabella with a stern demeanor, he delivered his verdict. "Isabella, you are no longer welcome in this house. Leave immediately." His tone was cold and final. Stunned by his words, Isabella stood frozen in shock. What? What are you saying?" "I'm your daughter, Dad," Isabella exclaimed in disbelief. "I have only one child, my son, and this woman beside me, Mary, is my daughter-in-law. I no longer recognize you. Leave with your foolish husband." Bob, my father-in-law, responded with a sternness that startled me. I had only known him to be gentle and soft-spoken, but now his eyes were steely, commanding no opposition. Even Isabella seemed subdued by his authority. "Shall we depart then? We're relying on you moving forward," Bob continued, his demeanor shifting back to its usual warmth as he addressed me. With no other recourse, John and I complied with his directive. As we drove away, leaving Isabella behind in stunned silence, it felt surreal. Later, we learned that Bob had arranged with his lawyer to draft a last will and testament, ensuring that the inheritance would solely benefit John and guaranteeing that Isabella would not receive any portion of it. With Isabella gone, the house stood vacant and John and I expressed our desire to reside there. Bob gladly agreed. Isabella and her husband relocated to an apartment, but it became evident they had been tapping into Bob's finances even when he was in good health. Their extravagant spending habits landed them in debt, and now they struggle to settle it. Each day, I can't shake the feeling that this downfall was bound to happen for someone like Isabella, who lacks respect and gratitude towards her parent, regardless of biological ties. While tending to Bob's needs presents its challenges, my background in caregiving allows me to handle it without feeling burdened, and I